more resources, visit rym.org.
1, 2, 1, 2, 3.
The Local Youth Worker is a daily podcast that's centered on 5 questions each week. Ranging from the practical to the professional, we're looking for answers to the questions you're asking. Whether you're in full-time, part-time, or even volunteer youth ministry, this podcast is for you.
Hey everybody, welcome back. I'm talking to Lara Jensen all this week. Lara is the Assistant Director of Youth Ministry at Redeemer Church in Jackson, Mississippi. Yesterday, we were kind of having a conversation, veering away from our frequently asked questions, but a conversation on diversity. And we'll talk a little bit more about Lara's church ministry context a little bit later. But yesterday she shared a lot about her family and just how diverse her family is and all the moving around to various contexts throughout her life. And so if you missed that, I'd encourage you to go back and check that out. But Lara, in light of your family setting, what are some lessons that you've learned from being a part of a culturally diverse family? When I ask that question, what are some of those things that come to the top of your mind as you think about that?
Yeah, the first few things that come at the top of my mind would be, I think one of the most valuable lessons that I'm continuing to learn is that, people are people. And so I've seen that even within my family and with the different personalities that are expressed in my family and just the different cultures that in the midst of all of that, looking at my siblings and saying like, no, they're a person, like people are people and we're created beings and made in the image of God. Mm-hmm. And that's a lesson that I have to continually learn as how I view people, how I see people. And I don't always get it right. But kind of that idea that we're created beings and that we are sinful and that just like my siblings do, we are different from each other. It's helped me to see what brings them joy, what makes them hurt in a lot of ways, and to really be in tune with that are lessons that I'm learning when it comes to dealing with people. Mm-hmm. And yeah, that's probably the biggest lesson.
Yes, just that of being image bearers. I mean, you think of, especially in the church, we can throw that word around a lot, being an image bearer of God, but just the implications of that are so infinite. Yeah. And like you said, I mean, just, applying that to, this topic of diversity, to think about all humans are created in the image of God and how, just the spectrum of humanity and how we all look vastly different, but how we all reflect that image in unique and different ways is highly significant. That's an excellent lesson for sure.
Yeah, and I think there, have been other lessons that have been rooted in identity and belonging that, it's that I'm continuing to learn, and that, and that's not just something a person who's in a culturally diverse family that someone deals with, but everyone deals with that. Just even culturally, just sort of, especially with belonging. And really sort of in my mind, like, all right, what does that mean even in the midst of diversity and in different cultures? And so I think it's also another thing to it's helped me to, just learn from different cultures and how different cultures do things. And even with different languages. So those would probably be the main lessons.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm sure just giving you, maybe greater patience as well.
Yes.
Like you said,
Yeah.
learning from other cultures. I mean, I cannot imagine. Just as you said, some of your siblings were adopted at the age of 12 or somewhere around there and did not
Yeah.
speak English.
Yeah.
And just you think of, I mean, your parents specifically, and
Yeah.
the children that they had inside their household, and now okay, they're bringing in new children that are going to, not to put it crassly, but disrupt maybe some of the harmony,
Yeah.
because now okay, now everything, we were all on the same page, we were all speaking the same language. Now
Yeah.
we've got to change that. Um,
Yeah.
so I can't imagine just
And
what that was like. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
yeah, no, that's another lesson, patience. And I have one brother who he doesn't speak. I feel like all my siblings now, they speak really good English. But my one brother, his English is still pretty broken, and even just having conversations with him over the phone, I can just kind of sort of, my patience runs thin because I'm trying to explain something and he's not getting it, or he's trying to tell me something and I'm like, I don't understand what you're saying. And so even just simple conversations over the phone, and yeah, your patience then for me, it's been tested in a lot of ways. And just, that even being patient with, I think sometimes the chaos that, large families can kind of have, and being patient with that. And hey, things aren't always going to go according to plan, and actually not at all. So, so patience is, it's a big one. I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, you just, like you said, I mean, 10 siblings, that's going to be plenty of opportunity for patience, for sure. But you give me hope, because I have 5 children and sometimes I don't think I'm going to make it through the day. But anyway, I'm glad to see that you made it.
Yeah.
So as you talked about, identity and belonging, and like you said, that's something, we as all, just humans are longing for, identity, and we look for that in so many other places. And we know that ultimately as Christians, we need to see that our identity is tied to being an image bearer of God, as well as being his child. But you mentioning belonging as well. Could you talk to me about that just a little bit more, and just kind of how you saw that in your family, how you see that in your family, and just how it's some of the maybe practical lessons that you learned about belonging?
Yeah. So it must have been like a couple weeks ago, but I called my mom and I sort of just thanked her, like. And I think part of that was with just how, even though, my family, it just sort of looked like a mixed bag of different people and different personalities. I'm sure when we went out to restaurants, it was just something for other people to see. But just how my parents, they did such a great job, I think, with giving us that sense of belonging, like each one of us, we mattered. And just the time and attention that they gave individually to us. Because I think sometimes when you have a lot of kids, it's like, one kid may be a little bit more trouble than the rest, which some of my siblings are. So
not you, of course.
Well, I probably fell in line with that too. But even though, like, they may have had to sort of shift in, all right, now we need to pay attention to their needs, whatever sibling it was. But I just really appreciated that they made it work. Even though you may look at me like, how did that work? And I think that sometimes, like, how did it work out? Like, we all made it out okay. But, yeah. And so I think also with that belonging piece, I think adoption plays into that plays into it. Because some of us don't know our our biological parents.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think for some of my siblings, that has been a really hard thing for them, not knowing, and that sense of like they belong, but they don't really belong. Or that's how they may communicate it. And so just even seeing how adoption, how that has affected some of my siblings in a negative way when it comes to their belonging and identity, and how for others it has been a positive thing. And it has sort of shaped our identity in a beautiful way. And yeah, so I think that speaks into belonging. And personally, like my own belonging. Yeah. I don't know if that answers the question. But,
no, that's helpful.
Okay.
Yeah. And did when you say just being, I don't think these are your exact words, but just proud of your parents and thankful for them and how they made this work. Have they talked about that? Have they talked about the community that they had? Were they a part of a church? And so they had just kind of that support from friends? Because obviously, I mean, as we just said, raising 10 children alone is going to be a challenge, but then you add in, different cultures, different languages, and that just makes the challenge that much more difficult. And so obviously God's grace for sure. But did they did they have a church community that kind of came alongside them and helped in the midst of this as well?
Yeah. So both my parents are Christians, and so they did have, a church that came alongside them. And then also just even seeing growing up, we lived in neighborhoods where the community in where we lived and pretty much every place we lived was incredible. And so even growing up and having our neighbors be a source of community, and these are people who didn't go to church. We're not Christians, but it was it was just, even in Boston, the neighborhood we lived in, all the kids and parents, they all got together on our street. And it was this community where everyone sort of came around one another. And so like, it was like, wow, this is what it means to be a neighbor to someone. In a lot of ways, just seeing the neighborhoods where we lived, neighbors come together and love us and babysit us when our parents had the night to go, have a date night. That was really sweet growing up, where it's like I felt like in a lot of ways I was also raised by neighbors. It's sweet to have that.
Yeah, that's awesome, because that community is vital. I mean, again, just parenting, as I've heard someone say, if parenting doesn't humble you, nothing will. And so I know just the need of having community in the midst of parenting children, because it can be very challenging. And those date nights are important for sure. So that's awesome that y'all had that community coming alongside y'all. Well, Lara, once again, this was really helpful. Thank you.
You're welcome.